Everyone associated with St. Thomas knows our mission. Inspired by Catholic intellectual tradition, the mission of the University of St. Thomas is to educate students to be morally responsible leaders who think critically, act wisely, and work skillfully to advance the common good. It is hard to miss our firm commitment to the common good. Let's spend a few minutes exploring that idea.
Where does this term come from?
The common good holds a time-honored position in Catholic intellectual tradition. It was incorporated from ancient Greek philosophy early on in Christian history and expresses a basic moral goal. Groups and societies ought to be organized in ways that enable persons to flourish. We see the term used, for example, in the writings of St. Barnabas in the 1st century, who encouraged people to, quote, come together and seek out the common good, and in the writings of St. Augustine in the 4th century, who wrote, quote, whenever you show greater concern for the common good than your own good, you grow in love. The common good was an important idea in the thinking of our patron, St. Thomas Aquinas, in the 13th century. He held that individual good is bound up with the common good. A person who seeks the good of many, he said, seeks as a consequence one's own good. In the Catholic intellectual tradition, there are thinkers and activists. Our founder, Archbishop John Ireland, was more the activist. He was a charismatic civic leader both on the local and national levels during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He exhorted people to, quote, seek out social evils and lead in movements that rectify them. Ireland was particularly committed to education and to ending racism in the church and the country. An obituary described him as a practical thinker on social issues who was militant for public welfare and engaged in large work for the common good. The common good is indeed part of our legacy at St. Thomas. It's in our very DNA.
How should we think about the common good? In contemporary Catholic intellectual tradition, the common good is the full network of social conditions which enable persons and groups to flourish and live genuinely human lives. There are a few points that underlie this idea.
The first is that all persons share a common human dignity. We are individuals and we experience and realize our dignity by encountering the dignity of others. Because persons have dignity, they have the basic human rights to the freedoms and social goods necessary for development. Rights such as political and religious freedoms, education, healthcare, and to just wages. The pursuit of these goods finds its fulfillment in social life. Second, the common good requires a particular concern for the poor and vulnerable in our groups and society, what Catholics call the option for the poor. Third, the common good assumes a certain confidence in persons, namely that we have the ability and indeed the inclination to dialogue and work together, even in the face of tension and conflict. Thus, the common good flourishes with civic respect and friendship. Fourth, advancing the common good is a process. It challenges people to see a particular community as it is and as it could be, to judge a situation or social practice by the standards of truth, justice, and compassion, and to act, to support or change the processes to enhance the development of persons.
How then should we act to advance the common good?
First, the common good relies on the just production and distribution of a wide range of social goods and services. What this means is that people are to live their lives in their relationships and their jobs as best they can. Whether a student or a professor or accountant or administrator, public safety officer or surgeon, we are all called to do our job well. Work contributes to the common good. Now, this is a good start, but the common good demands something more. It recognizes the fact that our lives are interconnected in multiple ways with others and with creation. We are social beings, and we naturally form families and groups and societies. We know that these relationships are meant to support personal development, but they can also be used to manipulate and repress personal development. We are thus compelled to create the environments in all these groups that enable people to flourish.
We then act for the common good on multiple levels. On one hand, we are all called to do individual acts of love and justice. The most fundamental level of work for the common good is person to person. On the other hand, we are called, in our particular lives, to respond to issues challenging the global common good. For example, the climate crisis, the migration emergency, and international food insecurity. Perhaps most importantly, we are also called to act in that huge middle range of relationships to create the conditions for people to develop in the many groups and institutions and societies of which we are members.
And one more thing. At the University of St. Thomas, our work to advance the common good invites us to reflect on the deeper questions of life. We know that our relation to God is bound up with our relation to our neighbor. Through love of God, we show our love for our neighbors. Through love of our neighbors, we exhibit our love for God. For God, St. Thomas Aquinas tells us, is the common good. What did you do for the common good today?